What we need for the country is a few large marquee investors coming in here, which kind of showcases the country as a stable environment for people to come and invest into.
This migrating issue is not a new issue. Now the problem is its pace is accelerated. But if you look at any organization to build that, yes, talent is the base. Key three things. One is a workforce. Second one is a work model. The third one is a workplace.
Again, I will boil it down to leadership. It's not that we don't have the resources, we don't have the capacity or capability. But the challenge is when you go as Sri Lanka, you have to be relevant at that point in time. So today, if we are stepping into international market, do we have what it takes? So that relevance obviously would take time if you are not being attuned to what the global market is looking from you.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of our interview series Shared Values, partnering with Reshape Europe. The Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom Sri Lanka office, in partnership with EconomyNext, has put together this wonderful series where we look at the shared values between the European Union and Sri Lanka, and where we can tap into these shared values to create economic growth and prosperity in the post-crisis period. Delighted to have three wonderful panelists. I'm going to start with Kumudu Gunasekera, the Managing Director of Stax. The ever so famous Ramesh Shanmuganathan, Group CIO and Executive Vice President at John Keells Holdings, and last but not least, Thushera Kawdawatta, who is the CEO of Axiata Labs. Welcome, gentlemen. I'm going to start with you, Kumudu. Look, the IT, BPM, global business services industry in Sri Lanka has actually not tried to be everything to everybody. They focus on some core key niches around software product engineering, things like financial accounting, outsourcing for the GBS market. In your view, do you think that strategy has worked?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me, Imran and team. I think the strategy has been more an organic led strategy rather than a deterministic strategy. And I think what we are missing is a national level branding of what we are doing as a group. And it's been ad hoc, and you gave the introduction as, it's a technology sector. I think we need to make it more broader, make it more the knowledge services sector, which has different elements to it. Because to me, technology is a facilitator, it's a tool that is based for every industry. So that's not really the sector, it's really the knowledge services sector that we need to kind of focus on. This is not new to Sri Lanka because, tourism, for example, we are still trying to brand what we are, tourism. So
Very
that's
true.
One of the ancient industries. We are still trying to figure that out. But we need to leapfrog that. We can't have this industry go through the same arduous process that tourism is going through. In terms of branding, I would say we need to kind of really, if you look at the 5 billion mark that we are kind of focusing towards, today we have rough estimates around 80,000 broad knowledge service sector workforce. So we can't get to 5 billion with 80,000. The only way for us to get is go after higher bill rates. So it's really a bill rate game, and so, back of the envelope calculation of, say, if we can get to, in the next couple of years, to 100,000 knowledge services employees, and each employee generates about $50,000 per year, that is 5 billion. That's how we should think about it. And if you look at the bill rates, then we should kind of look at a tiered system where, there's level 1 work, which is your basic, metaverse kind of facilitation, data annotation, etc. Then you have your level 2 work, which is data science, and some of those elements. And then you have higher order level 3 work, which is kind of digital transformation of companies, and also product development. I think that gets into the level 3. So if you kind of think of a 3-tiered structure at higher, and each succeeding structure gets to higher bill rates, but on average per employee we can get to $50,000, then we'll hit our mark. The last point I'd like to make about this is, when we are looking, because it's a crowded field, we have to create niches. the way to create niches is to really focus in on certain industries. So let's get better known as health tech, fintech, retail tech. So then we can really build, if you just take the health tech example, you have health administration, you have health technology in terms of the tools that we use, scanning machines and whatnot. So there's a whole lot of sub segments within the healthcare sector also we can go. So it's really, if Sri Lanka can figure out, okay, we are focusing on these 3 sectors, and then these 3 sectors, we are going to be knowledge services kings, I think we can really accelerate, get into the 5 billion.
Okay, interesting insights, Kumudu. I'm going to come to you, Ramesh, and I'm going to take something that Kumudu said. So one thing that he emphasized was the fact that digital or technology is actually just a tool, right? And also it's an enabler. Yeah. And also we need to focus on certain sectors as opposed to trying to be everything to everybody. To do that, I think first we need to start with our domestic companies and industries, because that's where you can identify a few sectors, and also you keep the kind of ecosystem to build on.
Yep.
Right? But yet, even with COVID, all that we've been going through, just a simple thing like a fuel pass, you can see, right? There's a massive resistance to digitalization, where the benefits are a no-brainer, really. How do you overcome that, and then hopefully identify these sectors?
Yeah, I think simple and short answer that I would have is, I always say there is 4 stages of maturity that you need to cross, right? First being conscious of incompetence, then you become unconscious state of incompetence, then conscious state of incompetence, then conscious state of competence, then unconscious state of competence, right? So one thing that I've seen in Sri Lanka, sad to say, is that we don't know what we don't know, right?
Very true.
And unfortunately, that wave of transformation is faced with a lot of resistance because of not that people don't see the benefit. It's in terms of to create that inertia, in terms of momentum. For any transformation, that you need to have the minimum inertia, right? Which is what is lacking in Sri Lanka. So there are few companies who are able to create that inertia and move forward. But as a country, we have not been able to create that inertia, right? So the proof of point being the digital identity card, right? 20 years running, we're still at the same place, right? And which is a must-have if you really want to really make an inclusive society. You take Fuel Plus, would have been a cakewalk if we had that, right? So today, we don't have an identity for the citizen, right? So how do you transform a country when you don't have that, right? So in an organizer, I know at John Keys, we spoke of digital identity in 2006. So we were able to accelerate our transformation journey because of that, right? There are certain decisions that won't have a clear ROI. But as people, as leaders, we also need to understand what are those must-haves that we need to create that inertia for it to move, right? So I think that is where I feel private sector as well as public sector is struggling, because lack of leadership. I don't think it's lack of technology, lack of capability, lack of competency. It's pure lack of leadership and not having forbearance in terms of where you want also to take Sri Lanka forward.
Very good. Thank you for that insight. Actually, we have even I think a credit line and also technical support offered by India for their based on their digital ID. Yeah. And it's just sitting for the last I think couple of
Bill
weeks.
Gates and Belinda Foundation I heard came forward
with one of those because they see the value. Yeah. Exactly. I'm going to come back to leadership and what private sector can do. But another thing that I want to touch base on, Thushera, was something else that Kumudu said as well when we started off. That is the talent pool, right? And I think I agree with him in terms of the billing rate. So to get from 80 to 100,000, that's 25% or more, I think, fast. How do we build that? Because we start off with really not having skills in certain areas of future growth, like AI. And then in other areas, we have people migrating, and that is to be expected. And I think once the crisis unfolds, we will have more. That's always been a case. How do we build this talent pool, and how do we keep that talent pool?
Yeah, thank you, Imran. This migrating issue is not a new issue, right? It has been there since I think I started 25 years ago. Now the problem is its pace is accelerated. Now it's migrating more. But if you look at any organization to build that, yes, talent is the base. We need to think about few things. One is key three things. One is a workforce. Second one is a work model. The third one is a workplace. Right? Now, when you look at the workforce, that's where actually we need to think about building competencies, upskilling, reskilling. And mind you, now the table have turned. I'm not interviewing a candidate. Actually, candidates are interviewing organizations, right? They're asking a question, is it the right place for me? Do I have the right career path, right? In that case, the workforce management have to think differently, right? Mindset in terms of setting the upskilling is just not the certification, it's the employee experience. Good example is some of the people who have been with us migrated, they never left the company, they only changed the country. Now they actually work from those countries, they're working for us, right? All around the world, US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and all these countries. That's where I think we need to give that the employee experience. The work model is, in any organization, any consulting engagement, you typically get about 70% managers and 30% engineers. We have to, again, flip it, right? We have to have more engineers, give the autonomy and the empowerment for them to do their job, and have the smaller, maybe 30% infrastructure support facilities and the managers to facilitate them and enable them, right? With this model, to the Kumudu's point, now we are creating more engineers and more workforce supporting that work model, where actually we flip that more engineer orientation to a manager orientation, right? The third one is the workplace, right? The diversity is very important, right? How you create that diversity, how you create an environment that people are allowed to freely innovate. The culture of innovation have to come in, right? Through that, the Kumudu's point, I agree, and some points I disagree. The point that I agree is actually when you look at the products, you can't go linear here. The headcount to revenue, that is not the game for Sri Lanka, right?
Interesting.
We have to think about non-linear. How the non-linear comes, it's actually have the product, developing products, coming up with innovations, creating platforms, and the collaboration amongst the industry to kind of synergize that to get the maximum productivity, right? So that's where I think we need to focus on in terms of retaining talent, attracting talent, and developing talent.
Interesting, very interesting. And yes, please.
I think that's a great point, Thushera. I think to me, the point of disagreement is, I think trying to go into products without having a vibrant service-based economy is going to be challenging.
True.
So if you can build a good, vibrant service-based economy, that will start generating products, because you need you need that ecosystem to be built. It's like you can't get into a product company straight. I mean, you can, but that means you're going to take 10 years of trying out various products before you have one thing that hits. So, for example, you guys, you have a vibrant service based company that enables you to actually invest in products that you have identified through trial and testing.
Exactly.
Interesting. I think bringing all of what the three of you have been saying so far, I think the key is to create those hubs that spur innovation. And then a few days ago, I was walking through Kendall Square, which is in Boston. That's near the MIT campus. And what I was amazed is to see the amount of collaboration from different partners. So you had academia, obviously, that's one of the most reputable technical universities in the world. But in addition to that, you had large corporates set up the innovation hub, right? When you just walk out within the clusters of buildings. Then you had these law firms that were doing IP commercialization, setting up branches there. You had a little bit of government regulators there. So all of these things have come together, and I don't, from what I can see, it's an organic kind of creation, right? I'm sure that MIT has brought them together, but still, there is some organic creation. Now, sometimes governments do this in different parts of the world. But I don't think our government is going to do anything in any whichever party is in power. So how does the private sector step up and do this? I mean, I'm not talking about like, a large, like a co-working space or IT park. I'm talking about, real collaboration between very diverse partners. Kumudu, you want to make a...
Sure. Short answer is I think government is, in all cases where agglomeration economies have been created, it has been government driven. But I'm going to challenge you on a bit, saying, but this is very close to me. Agglomeration is something that I studied from my dissertation as well. Krugman in the 90s won his Nobel Prize for modeling agglomeration. But to me, that's an outdated concept, and I'll tell you why. Agglomeration started with the manufacturing based agglomeration, right? Steel factories, all the cities that came near ports and rail yards. That's because cost of transportation was high, so you wanted to have things close by. As the cost of transportation went down with the Panama Canal and the Supermax or whatever those large ships coming in, the cost of transportation went down. The need for that went down, so you now have different supply chains, and this just-in-time concept came about. Then about 50 to 60 years ago, what you talked about in Boston happened, and New York and different countries, San Fran, Silicon Valley. That was knowledge-based agglomeration. But that also, to me, has now gone away because knowledge-based agglomeration happened. You needed people and you needed...
proximity as well.
Proximity.
Yeah, the universities and all that. Yeah.
But with communication, with improved communication, you don't need that. Now you can have people all over the world have what you call virtual agglomerative effects can be created. So you really don't need this agglomerations to happen. What we need for the country is a few large marquee investors coming in here, which kind of showcases the country as a stable environment for people to come and invest into. Then that is what we need.
And I agree. I think if you look at our real estate sector, that happened in the early 90s, and with SP Tao coming in, and then Mahil and people like that, they created the physical infrastructure. Right now, I think for tech, we need more reputed global players that we will come in. Ramesh, would you like to add?
Yeah, I think I agree with Kumudu to an extent, because I think I just wrote this article to Echelon about a couple of months back about EXO, creating exponential organizations, right? So I think today it's about that massively transformative purpose which unifies and brings this ecosystem together. Right? So if you look at John Keys, we launched John Keys X about 6 years back, but very philanthropic in nature when we started saying we want to help startups. At this time, it's gone into a pivot where we have 3 tracks. Accelerate, which is for the startups. Then we have an open innovation thing called Innovate, and then Elevate for scale-ups, right? So that has also come about due to selfish reasons, because we also see merit in terms of tapping into that ecosystem which is outside John Keys and creating those bridges, right? So I think the importance is it's also not right from our part to assume and expect the government to do this kind of thing, right? So in the past, I know certain governments like Singapore, Dubai, Ireland, Israel have been able to do it because they're a small economy and small in size, right? So when the country become bigger, you have a huge population where the per capita income spreads across a wider continuum is tough. So I think that is where I feel those communities are best created by, like what he said, in terms of where you see natural gravitation towards forming that ecosystems and benefits, where you could definitely scale up faster by leveraging each other's assets and resources rather than you committing your own thing, right? So I think that is where I feel that EXO is much more applicable if people start understanding and using it rather than thinking everyone you collaborate is a competitor.
Interesting.
Right.
Yes.
I think that competition, you cooperate and you compete together, is a great thing that we should start leveraging, because our culture has been the biggest stumbling block for that.
Absolutely. Thushera?
Yeah, I think I agree with both Kumudu and Ramesh. So again, when you talk about the pockets of success, it has to be beyond that, right? So you can't rely on the pocket of success. It has to be beyond that. It has to be much wider, much larger. And how you get there is only through collaboration, right? I mean, take a small entity which is a project. Why project successful? Because it's all as a one team, so you collaborate and you compensate each other, right? And then you talk about particular industry, then industry have to collaborate each other. Then you talk about the again, as a country, we need to collaborate each other. So there are assets that we should leverage, to Ramesh's point. And then again, there has to be the larger is you can't have maybe smaller here and there success also. Like in that case, Kumudu's point, we need a larger spike, which could be a big investment coming in for us to really kind of think next level, right? And then all of these, you can't have smaller pockets of success. It has to be larger pockets of success, right? And how you bring that? You have to have the purpose and the clear goal where you want to be, right? When you get there, then you know what you're trying to do. So you understand my purpose, my goal, and then you know whom to collaborate, what to collaborate, right? And the mindset of not invented here, have to get out, right? So then think about leveraging each other. So we are now, for example, one of the best API management solution we have taken from WSO2, and then we have built our own telco and fintech specialized flavor. Now it has hit the global market. Now one of the top-notch telcos are using this platform, right? Now that's the synergy, right? That's the synergy. We got the best, and then we made it up even better, right? So that's how we should move on.
And just to add to that, I think when we're talking about agglomeration, what we're talking about the ecosystem is the conducive ecosystem for these expats to come and work here.
Right.
That is what we need. We need to have good schools, easily accessible. We need to have good public transportation. We have bike lanes. Those are things that folks look and say it's a livable city. So we have to make this a livable city.
Absolutely. And easy visas to come.
Smart, livable city, that's agglomeration for me. That is bring in the investor to you.
Agreed. And I think also, if you remember that telecom sector, at least in mobile, that big investor was Axiata or Malaysia Telecom, if I would say. I think they then raised the bar for everybody, and everybody had to raise their own, raise their game and also collaborate to some extent, right?
Exactly.
I think that's where you go. Something else that you said, Thushera, and I want to come to you for that, right? You said you have staff continuously work from, even when they leave the country and work in different parts of the world. And that lends, into my next question, is that you are in the best position, I guess, to look at benchmarking where you are versus what the rest of the world is doing, which then lets you also elevate your own performance. How does Axiata Labs do that? And has that led to, your performance becoming among the best in the world in some respects?
So at the end, ADL is a global organization. We have branch offices in the region, about 4 branch offices, right? Then we definitely have to do a benchmarking against the best of the best. Then we took on, as a first year itself, we took on CMMI as a benchmarking level. So we are the first to certified in CMMI version 2 in Sri Lanka, right? So that gave us a good platform to look at, okay, we have the best practices that we are following to deliver our engineering solutions. Then we looked at the industries, how we can get to the place where we compete and look at where we are, right? That's only way is like, okay, then apply for some of these global awards. Then we have won the 4 global awards, championship award from TM Forum. Then we know that the telco standards, we are one of the best in the world, right? And then we got into the TMF codes, which we are a pioneer member, where we contribute to the setting up the global standards, right? So they put up the platforms for everybody to follow. And we are the pioneer in even defining and developing and kind of setting a standard for the global market, right? And then again, the standards like ISO, and we become the first organization to have the GDPR similar compliance in the industries, right? So that gives us a confidence as an organization. Yeah, we are in par with the global standards, that our solutions, our methodologies, our competencies are at a global level, right? So that is a must, because what you do, sometimes you settle with the mediocre, the performance, right? You should, and you keep challenging yourself, anything else that we can do better, anything else, the best practices can we follow, and then even make it better, right? So that's what I think we should do. I think, yes, the benchmarking is great. Then what we took was, after 3 years, we consulted one of the best consulting organization to come and do a benchmarking exercise for us. That exercise is right now going on. Now we are trying to adopt some of the best practices and recommendation from them for us to be a global organization and playing at the global scale.
Excellent, excellent. Ramesh, I'm going to come to you because to some extent your organization is a little opposite to that, because you're very focused on Sri Lanka, but with regional operations, and I think you're on expanding as well. So when you're very focused on one country, sometimes it's very difficult to push yourself because you are possibly best in the country, so complacency comes in. How do our domestic-based organizations then continuously push themselves?
I think rightly so, I think, as I said, post the 2009 peace dividend, unfortunately, most of the organization thought Sri Lanka is a gold mine and is worthy of their focus, right? And I think that islanders mentality is what I've heard most Sri Lankan organizations, right? The challenge is that because there are very few people who have had exposure to international markets, and that sticking to the comfort zone has always been the easiest choice, right? And those who have broken it have seen greater success. And as I said again, I will boil it down to leadership. It's not that we don't have the resources, we don't have the capacity or capability. But the challenge is when you go as Sri Lanka, so today if you get into running a 100-meter race or getting into a F1 circuit, you have to be relevant at that point in time, right? So today if we are stepping into international market, do we have what it takes, what products and services that market wants ourselves, right? So that's the question. It's not about when you wake up and say there is this whole market is waiting for you to come and do business. Are you relevant, right? So that relevance obviously would take time if you are not being attuned to what the global market is looking from you. Right? I think that's where the challenge is, right? So today you take in leisure, you take agriculture. So today I think we are in this crisis because we got a 11 billion trade deficit, right? We're importing 22 billion worth of stuff and exporting only 11 billion, and of which 5 billion is garments. And that's also not value added, right? So the question is, where do we need to really, if we want to double up to get to 22 billion exports, where is that area of focus? And where do countries and organizations have to focus and build competencies to be relevant to bridge the deficit? I think that's what I feel all of us need to be finding an answer for. And given that US and Europe are the biggest economies in 22 trillion and 15 trillion, those are the two markets that we need to be looking to export to.
Absolutely. The open one. I think the Chinese market would be great, but they're not open to anybody. So, interesting. Kumudu, something that I want to come back to is what you said about, getting one of these anchor, I would say, investors, somebody with a name that inspires. I'm not saying Elon Musk to come to Sri Lanka, but there were enough of, banners.
But there is this guy who...
Chamat.
Chamat. Yeah, there are enough and more guys. If I feel if the context is set right, there are enough and more Sri Lankans who would definitely are willing to come back to invest and create those bridges, right? I think it's about creating that conducive environment.
True. But one thing that we need to keep in mind, Kumudu, again, coming back to the question, is that rates are rising. Mm-hmm. And I think for tech funding is I wouldn't say dropping, but it's more discerning, in terms of where the value proposition is, and the return needs to be much more, I would say, firmer than it was when monetary policies were looser. Under such operating conditions, how do you look at getting one of these investors? And it doesn't have to be a Sri Lankan, It'd be nice to be a Sri Lankan.
Yeah, I mean, I think let's call a spade a spade. Right now, the country may just taken a battering as of July 2022. So we can't really expect to get an anchor investor today. The country battering, I think, will take about 2 years for this kind of image that has been created. Because we talked about agglomeration and we talked about livable cities. Today, it is not a livable city to attract investors. So we should kind of even pretend that it is. I think the way forward for us is it takes about a year or two to kind of repair this image if the correct governance is in place. Its economic problem is a very small problem. The grand scheme of things, it's not such a big hole. It's the governance issue that we need to. The fastest way for us to rebrand the country is through tourism. So the faster we can get back on Lonely Planet's, number one, the Time magazine's number one, those kind of accolades, and tourists starts coming in, then people will start seeing that as opposed to the fuel queues. So I think the sooner we can kind of get to that, that will help us bring in not the marquee investor, but at least some of the investors. In the second point you talked about, the global, we are all heading towards a global recession of sorts. So in that environment also, it's not easy for folks to cut a check and take a risk and come into these new geographies. So all in all, it's going to be a tough kind of 2 years for us to get new investors. What we need to focus on is how do you secure and keep the current investors who have invested into Sri Lanka here. There, I'll tell you, as part of BCP plans, all our investors are looking at other places to expand into. So how do we keep Sri Lanka relevant until our image is repaired? And number two is all these companies, all our global companies that are here have expansion plans within Sri Lanka. How do you kind of secure those expansion plans to proceed in the next 2 years? And then once the image is rectified, I think we can really go after the...
Interesting. And I think also we need to also get more people to come and visit, purely because it gives you a first-person perspective. I think the international media is, honestly, having been overseas and not really wanting to come, looking at what's going on, and then coming and finding it extremely peaceful.
Exactly.
I mean, I think we need to get this first-person perspectives out there.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Imran, I think the global media has been covering the sensational elements of it, whereas this was one of the most democratic transformation of a democratically elected government with 2/3 majority, not once, twice. So it's and one day it will be a case study that folks will really teach in these Ivy League universities about how democratic institutions were safeguarded and there was an amazing transformation. That message is not going out to the global media.
Exactly, and I think it also needs credible voices to kind of say it as well. So I know Mark Mobius is here around, and his voice carries a lot of weight because he is on international business media. But I think we need more of those people to come in, right? And I think then even the journalists.
And he has invested in Sri Lanka.
Obviously, he has invested in Sri Lanka. He has bought a home in Sri Lanka. He has, done the whole refurbishment of that home in Sri Lanka. So he's looking at the next, 20, 30 years to be here, and that carries a lot of weight because then people, know that you're putting money where your mouth is. I think that's important as well. A general question to all of you. Look, if you look at countries that have, that tech sectors as centers of excellence, right? For me, Israel is a very good example. Very small country, absolutely no natural resources, right? In the middle of a very volatile region, but still able to project themselves, several times more as a tech superpower. To so many parts of the world, not only just in like particular apps and services, but also into things like agri-tech, where there are, big countries want this advice as well. But they've been very open to partnerships. Even now with some countries in the Middle East that were technically at war with them, right? UAE and several other countries as well, Qatar. Well, what model will work for Sri Lanka? So we are a lot. We have a lot of good relationships, right? We are good with Russia. We are good with Ukraine, and that's a unique situation where people from both countries are here now. Some people even in the technical fields. Which is the model that works? Is it individual to individual, tech system to ecosystem, country to country? Which one will work? Ramesh, we'll start with you.
So, Imran, I don't think there is a specific answer to that, right? So it depends on the industry. Now, if you look at how the garment sector started here, MAST, Brandix, and MAS, right? So they started as a organization or individual organization. Now it's a huge industry, right? So today, if you really look at Sri Lanka, we are importing even basic things like agricultural products, right? So today, if what is stopping us from modernizing agriculture, drip irrigation, vertical farming, I'm just saying agri-tech could be a huge opportunity, right? So it could be organization to organization, even technology-based collaboration. So that's why I said if we are just purely talking of tech, you can obviously brand us as an innovation hub or thing to an MNC and look at how do you really attract investors to translate technology into the country, bring technology into the country, like what MAST did in terms of governments. So we got to look at partnerships in terms of what's in it for us, not purely for the money, right? Where do we want to take this country forward? What are the ABCs and Ds? And to get that, who is the best party to collaborate? Is it government? Is it an organization? It could be individuals. It doesn't matter, right? So as long as we can incubate what we need for this country to get up to where we want to, that's all matters.
Interesting. Very interesting. I think that applies to even telecom industry and so many other industries where technology was brought in as well.
But even you like ports, right? PNO now even. So I think
Adani's.
because today we were very short-sighted to send shell packing in 70s.
Sure.
Right? And we regret that today.
And they went to Singapore.
And we nationalized all the energy organizations. And we are paying the price for it. Monopoly. Right? So if we had the right partnership, Shell to prevail, competition to prevail, we wouldn't be in this mess.
Interesting. Thushera?
Yeah, I think if you look at the collaboration, or partnerships, there's no binary answer which one is work for us. What definitely we need to focus on is this company to company the partnership, because the companies bring some of their best assets and the competencies, right? What we need to look at in a partnership is, first thing is the innovation. Can we provoke more innovation, or maybe bring more innovation by the partnership? The secondly could be social benefit, right? So is there a social benefit in not creating jobs, or maybe like right environment, infrastructure, and all of these things? And then the actually very important legitimacy, right? So all these partnerships have to bring something is legitimate business to the market, right? And finally, I think the main topic of the skills and the resources, can we bring some of those skills and resources through the partnerships we need to also looking at. When you look at all of these things, then actually it drives a viable or maybe a very current solution that we are offering into our clients at the end, right? So in that case, partnerships is the way to go. Collaboration have to bring some of those things I talk about, like innovation to legitimacy.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, to me, you listed 4 elements, right? People to people, company to company, ecosystem to ecosystem, country to country. The last 2, ecosystem to ecosystem and country to country, we can't do. Because we don't have ecosystem, neither do we have a country strategy on this particular sector. So those 2 are out for me. I think those other 2 is the way to go. And I think Ramesh mentioned about MAs and that. And I think those were peer-to-peer and company-to-company, but there was a semblance of an ecosystem as well, because, through the 200 factory program and whatnot, there was kind of a concerted government effort to help this particular industry. That was done at 80s?
80s, yeah.
80s, right? Yeah. So 80s, yeah. So that was 35 years ago. Since then, there's not been a thrust industry that has been given that level of support. So we just need to have we have had 5 hub strategy. We've had so many different sectoral strategies, but nothing that continued for a long period of time. So we need something, pick something, run for it with healthcare, finance, fintech, ag tech, pick something, but support it for a 10-15 year period, then we will have.
I have a question that I want to ask as the final one, quick one, and anyone can go for this. And I want all answers from all 3 of you. So you're tech leaders now, right? And in the absence of national leadership in other parts of the world, for example, in Australia, the leaders of Mike Cannon-Brookes and Scott Furaha, who are the founders of Atlassian, have taken a very strong leadership in terms of the ecology. Right? Some of the Indian tech leaders have looked at things like digital identity and so many things that they have driven. So where are tech leaders in terms of leadership for this country?
So, I don't know, the unfortunate part is, I think for the technology leadership to emerge in providing a gateway into the global arena, I think you need empowerment. Right? I think from a Sri Lankan context, sadly, that is lacking. For the longest time as I said, I just came back to Sri Lanka in 99. First time I ever regretted coming back, purely because it's disheartening to see that your entire life's investment is going nowhere. Purely because there are certain facilitation which needs to happen, right? I think that is where the stakeholders, in terms, as I said, whether it is a constitution, whether the legislature, whether the executive or judiciary, ultimately the basics have to work.
Yes.
Right. So technology leadership in abeyance is not going to be fruitful to anyone. Right. So we can claim that we have technology superiority, but what end is it going to serve? That question needs to be answered.
Interesting. Kumudu, Thushera?
Yeah, I think in my view, there are very good leaders, right? But there's a fundamental issue in us, maybe culturally, right? Most of the leaders doesn't want to have the glamour or maybe the spotlight, right? They prefer perform in isolation and deliver the results. And the second problem is, even when the leaders are rising up and then put their hands up, the rest of the guys are looking at actually how can I drag this guy down.
Exactly.
Right? I think that I have seen that, unfortunately.
Exactly.
But I think we as a leaders, I think we need to get together and support any of these people when they put their hands up.
Kumudu, last word to you.
Yeah, I think we need to have a distinction between business leaders and governance of civil service leaders. And then there are political leaders. There are three sectors. I think your question is a bit misleading because the business leaders, I don't think, should be creating ecosystems and creating the livable cities. That is the civil,
Yes.
The civil service leaders.
Obviously. Yes.
That could, with the support of the political leaders. I think the mistake that we continue to make is we have business leaders who are retiring, who have made very good business decisions, and as a service to the country in retirement, they go into the civil service and try to make decisions. What we need is people in that kind of
prime.
Advisory.
They become the strong civil service where the career is civil service. And
that's what Singapore is doing.
Attract
Getting
the
the
best
best.
brains into the civil service.
Civil
Exactly,
service, yeah. So don't expect business leaders to become country leaders because they are not trained to do that.
And also maybe I think as a second line, what Kumudu said, I think in other countries, the administrative services, the secretaries or ministries are not politicized. And they are the subject matter experts in those respective things. And in our country, I think we've been moving away from that trend and politicizing those roles as well.
Yes, I think we've been doing since the 1970s.
One of the reasons there is no policy congruence across different regimes. And which also does not give comfort for anyone who wants to invest in the country, right? So I think those are basic things I feel it needs to get fixed.
Kumudu, Thushera, and Ramesh, thank you for your time. I think we have discussed beyond just the tech ecosystem as Oasis, as a center for global excellence, but also I think the leadership that this country requires, so that then the tech sector can add even more value than what it has been doing as of now. Thank you for your time.